Hi everyone, welcome. Today we are joined by the lovely Ali. Thank you, Ali, for joining us today.
Oh no, thank you for having me. It's awesome.
When I talk to a lot of people about travel and long-term travel, money is usually the first thing that comes to them. So they're like, how can you afford to travel? And especially long term. How have you found travel expenses has varied from what you've expected travel expenses to be like?
Well, when I first had my first solo trip, which was in Greece when I was 19, I kind of expected it to be stupidly expensive. That was my big fear that I'd run out of money and that I knew accommodation was expensive. But back then, I didn't know anything about travel. I didn't know anything about budget travel. I had no idea what I was doing for the first couple of years. Not a clue. But over time, you kind of figure out ways to reduce your costs in every aspect, like accommodation. You can go from paying, thinking you have to pay $25 a night to couch surfing for absolutely free.
Yeah.
But when you first start out, if you don't follow bloggers or anything, you just don't know those things are out there. So with experience now, I can travel at a fraction of what other people would be traveling the same way for. But I think that comes from experience. And some cities and countries are very expensive outright. Some countries like Australia, etc., Hong Kong, things like that, you're just going to have to be prepared that it's going to be a bit more expensive. But there are always ways of cutting it back. Always.
I had a trip recently where I had a stopover for about a week in Copenhagen. That I was visiting a friend, which was so expensive. And
Yeah.
I always got a little bit confused about the exchange rate. And so I'd go in, I'd get a coffee, and I'm like, a coffee can't be that much. And then I'd calculate it out and be like, $8 Australian or something. And I'm like, oh my God, why? It was crazy.
However, I think a lot of people think that just because the place is expensive, that they'll never be able to afford it. So I want to just clarify, when I say it's expensive, like Australia is an expensive country, it's not impossible to travel around. And thousands of backpackers are doing it right now on a budget. So it's not high-end luxury expensive. It's just slightly higher than what you'd pay in other parts of the world. But I think those kind of places scare travelers away, especially budget travelers. But
Yeah.
I think you've just got to go and really hunt out, like you said about coffee. The longer you're in a place and you start wandering around and you get to know the exchange rate, you'll find little places that will do cheaper coffees. But I think as soon as you arrive in an expensive country, you just got to be prepared that a lot of your budget is just going to be blown through trial and error.
For sure, for sure. Experience is definitely the key to learning how to travel,
Yeah,
and learning how to budget travel long term.
definitely.
And the great thing about this day and age is that there's so many resources available to you, and especially that things like your channel and other travel bloggers and budget travel bloggers are just more and more out there. So the resources are becoming more and more readily available for the
Yeah,
average person to do a quick search online and figure out their journey. And even when they're traveling on the road and they're like, oh, I'm in this town, I've got a couple of hours, what are some cheap things to do around here? They can quickly Google that and it'll come up with mountains of stuff they can do for free or very cheap. The resources out there are amazing, because definitely in the past it was definitely just trial and error.
yeah, absolutely. I remember when I started traveling, like I said, there was just barely anything, and I didn't know what to search for. It wasn't a big trendy thing to go online and look at bloggers or watch YouTube videos.
Yeah.
And now it's huge. I wish I'd have known what I knew now, because the budget I spent on my first ever trip, wow, I could have made that go miles now. If I'd have just known and I had somewhere to go, they could break down what costs were.
Mm.
Yeah, but there wasn't a lot of that when I started traveling.
Yeah, well, thanks to you and other people like you now, it's becoming available. So you're like making the way for future cheap travelers.
You're welcome.
Awesome.